A surgeon turned alleged killer walking into an Illinois courtroom cuffed in a jail jumpsuit, now accused of a horrific crime. A divorced ex-husband who allegedly planned, plotted, and killed his ex-wife and her husband with children in the home. Michael McKee allegedly drove more than 6 hours to the home of Spencer and Monique Tepe and shot them dead in the middle of the night on December 30th.
Your name, sir, for the record?
Michael McKee.
Not only do we have the new courtroom video of McKee appearing today, we also have documents that shed light on his failed marriage and what police say locked them in on him as their suspect. We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Hey guys, real quick, there is a reason On the Case is one of the most watched shows on YouTube, and there is a reason that Morgan & Morgan is America's largest personal injury law firm. They're a firm with more than 1,000 attorneys who have recovered $25 billion for more than 500,000 clients. In the past few months alone, a client in Florida received $12 million when insurance offered just $350,000, and in Pennsylvania, another client was awarded $26 million, 40 times the insurer's offer. Morgan & Morgan makes it easy to fight for what you deserve. You can even start a claim from your phone. So if you're injured, you can start a claim at forthepeople.com/OTC. You can click the link below or scan the QR code on your screen. Why did Michael McKee allegedly kill his ex-wife, Monique Tepe, and her husband, Dr. Spencer Tepe, in the middle of the night on December 30th inside their home in Columbus, Ohio? That is a question that may take some time to definitively answer.
Your name, sir, for the record?
Michael McKee.
Here is McKee making his first court appearance today in Rockford, Illinois. It's about an hour and a half west of Chicago. There, he entered the room in a jail jumpsuit. His hands were shackled, and he only said his name calmly when the judge asked. Now, we'll talk more about what will happen next in his criminal proceedings in just a moment. But this is what we know about Michael McKee, a little bit of it. To this point, McKee is a vascular surgeon in Rockford, Illinois. Court documents show that he has an address for an expensive condo building in the Lincoln Park area of Chicago. McKee, though, is a native of Ohio. He went to Ohio State. That's where he graduated in 2014. And it's believed at OSU is where he met Monique. And this is a picture of them on their wedding day in 2015. Now, the couple were married for only roughly 2 years. They divorced in 2017. They didn't have children. Now, we have acquired the documents related to McKee's divorce, and here's what we know about that. We know that after graduating from Ohio State, McKee did a residency to continue his surgical training in Roanoke, Virginia, and Monique lived with him there for a period of time. McKee has active medical licenses in Illinois and California. We also have the documents for the end of the marriage that show at the time they divorced, Monique was actually living in Ohio. The decree states that Michael was given the home in Virginia and Monique was awarded the divorce on the basis of incompatibility. Now, as this investigation started, there were many people who found out that Monique had been married before. You could find it in public records. And that started to point the finger at McKee, the ex-husband. But as this case moved on, it had been reported that the divorce between McKee and Monique was amicable. Court records also seem to show that. And it also shows that McKee was living in another state. But then something obviously changed in this investigation, and detectives ended up circling in on Michael McKee. Now, before we get to what happened in court today in Rockford, I do want to get to what police say really cracked this case. And this is at least the little bit that they're giving us right now, because they haven't officially said that McKee was the person of interest walking near the Tepes' home in that video that they put out last week around the time that the Tepes were killed. But when you think about surveillance video, there is no doubt that that video played a role in their ability to track down Michael McKee as their suspect. So let's walk through what happened where police are now filling in the holes. You have Monique and Spencer Tepe. Now, that couple married in 2020. This is according to their obituaries. And this is actually, of course, their wedding video of the celebration that they had in 2021 that was shot by Spencer's brother-in-law, who gave us permission to show you this video. We know that Spencer and Monique, and this was years after Monique had divorced Michael McKee, Spencer and Monique met online, and they built what appears to be an incredible life together. Spencer was a dentist who was beloved at his office. It seems he really loved his job. Monique was someone who cared a lot about young people. She had her degree in early childhood education from Ohio State, but then she became a stay-at-home mom to raise Spencer and Monique's 4- and 1-year-old children. Now, we kept hearing over and over again that Spencer and Monique were just people who loved to bring people together. They loved having people over to their home in Columbus. They were the life of the party. Monique is being remembered as someone who was a great friend. She loved to bake. Spencer, he loved his Ohio State Buckeyes, and he also loved the Cincinnati Bengals. He grew up in the Cincinnati area. Now, Spencer graduated from Ohio State as well. He graduated in 2017 with his degree in dental surgery. Spencer worked at a dental office that was roughly 75 miles away from his house in Athens, Ohio, which is a heck of a commute. And on December 30th, Spencer didn't show up for work. And his office was very concerned, so they called 911.
Columbus Police, Tech 107.
Yes, I would like to ask for a wellness check on an individual at their home.
Now, if you've been following this story with us, you know these 911 calls that were made on the day that Spencer and Monique were found dead. The calls started around 9 o'clock in the morning when Spencer didn't show up at the dental office.
This individual, Spencer, works with me, and he did not show up to work this morning, and we cannot get a hold of him or his family.
He didn't show up to work?
Correct.
Okay. Does he have medical problems or?
No, and he's been reliable, and we cannot get in touch with him, his wife, his family, anybody that lives in that house.
Okay. So
There's
you're
2
in
kids in
Florida.
the home. I'm in Florida. I own the business. I was informed by my employees that he was not at work, and he runs the office.
That first call came in from Spencer's boss, who was on vacation in Florida. He says when he started getting calls from employees who were concerned that Dr. Tepe didn't show.
Have you guys received anything else, like calls about him or like a car accident or anything like that?
No, sometimes people just don't show up to work. I mean, maybe he's sick, I don't know.
Now, as much as that dispatcher, you hear them say, well, it's just common for people not to show up, or maybe he's sick, maybe he overslept. His boss, knowing Spencer, was adamant that something was up because Spencer just wouldn't show up for work.
I just know that he is the most, like, he is always on time, and he would contact us if there was any issues whatsoever. And I just don't know how else to say this. Like, we're very, very concerned because this is very out of character. And we can't get in touch with his wife, which is probably the more concerning thing.
So about 20 minutes later, a police officer in Columbus was dispatched to the home of Spencer and Monique Tepe, but they reported they didn't see anything, so they left. There was more context to that we learned last week because this is the body cam video from that officer's response, and you can see they're not at the right house. The chief of police in Columbus did say that the officer mistakenly went to a home that was a few minutes away from the Tepe's house. So even though that police officer had left saying, hey, I couldn't find anything, concerned friends of the Tepes, they just knew something was wrong. So they went to Spencer and Monique's house. And they say when they got there, they could hear the Tepes' children inside the home. This was around 10 o'clock in the morning.
Okay, what's the emergency there, police or medical?
Maybe both, I guess. I don't know. I'm kind of doing the
we already
wellness.
had a call out there. They knocked on the front door and back door multiple times, and there was no answer.
Yeah, no answer. I can hear kids inside, and I swear I think I heard one yell, but we can't get in. At this point, I don't know if I need to break the door in or just get in the house or what. So.
Okay, were you out there when the police was out there?
I wasn't. I just got here about 5 minutes ago.
Okay, all right, well, we'll send them back out to you.
Then there was another call from Spencer's work.
Our boss did not report for work. We haven't been able to get a hold of him for 3 hours. We are on site, and we can hear kids
Okay, I
inside.
just talked to somebody there.
Okay, I'm just making sure somebody called.
5 minutes later, the phone call that comes in that takes this story to a whole other level, where it's no longer about a couple that was missing and maybe they missed work, maybe they overslept. It became a terrifying reality.
We've got several calls on that. What's changed since the last person I talked to?
There's a body. There's
There's a body inside?
Yeah.
Okay, hold on 1 second. Let me get you on the line with the medic, okay? Stay on the line.
Now, as the caller waits, you can hear the sounds of small children in the background. The Tepe's kids, they were unharmed.
There's a body. Our friend wasn't answering his phone. We just did a wellness check. We just came here, and he appears dead.
Okay.
There's blood. He's laying next to his bed, off of his bed, and there's blood. I can't get closer to see more than that.
Okay, so you can tell he's obviously not breathing or anything?
Yeah, yeah.
Is it like kind of like puddle, like, you know, does he look like...
It doesn't look puddled. I can't look.
Okay, all right, I understand. Okay, and then when was the last time somebody spoke to him?
Yesterday, I suppose.
Yesterday? Okay.
Yeah.
How old is he?
37.
37, okay. Is he like a drug user or anything like that?
No.
Okay, all right, just that's a really young age.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay, all right, we're on our way.
The concerned friend says they saw Spencer's body inside the home.
Caller saying they can hear kids inside. Thought he heard one of them yelling. Now we're getting another call saying there's a body inside. S3 copy.
Who's saying there's a body inside?
Now, when police went inside, they found Spencer dead as well as his wife. Police say that they found Dr. Tepe in a second-floor bedroom. He was shot multiple times. Monique was also found in a second-floor bedroom. She had at least one gunshot wound to the chest. Police said that they did not have a murder weapon. It's unclear at this point if they have that murder weapon after zeroing in on their suspect of Michael McKee. Police reportedly recovered 9mm shell casings as well from the scene. So that is critical evidence. We'll see how it factors into how they make their case against Michael McKee as the criminal proceedings go on. A big question still at this point is, how was McKee allegedly able to get into the Tepe's home? Remember, police said there were no signs of forced entry. It is unclear also what type of contact he had with Monique, if any, after their divorce. The chief of police late last week gave interviews to local media in Columbus, and she said that at that point they didn't have a suspect, but they also said they couldn't share everything that they knew. Then, about 24 to 48 hours after those interviews with local media, it was between Friday and Saturday around midnight that bombshell arrest happened, records showing that Michael McKee, the vascular surgeon, was booked into jail in Rockford, Illinois, just after midnight on Saturday. This is his mugshot. Since his arrest, McKee's charges have been upgraded to aggravated premeditated murder. Obviously, this is a huge step in the investigation, but there is still a lot that we don't know about the case that is being built against McKee. Here is what we do know, though, about how police seem to zero in on him. So this is a page from the criminal complaint that reads, quote, "During the subsequent investigation, detectives were able to identify a suspect through neighborhood video surveillance. The suspect was tracked to a vehicle which arrived just prior to the homicides and left shortly after the homicides. Detectives were able to identify this vehicle further and link it to Michael McKee. Detectives located the vehicle in Rockford, Illinois, and found evidence of McKee in possession of the vehicle prior to and after the homicides." Police narrowed the timeline that they believe that the Tepes were murdered down to between 2 and 5 o'clock in the morning on December 30th. And that's when they asked the public to provide videos or any information they have from that time and that area of Columbus. They released this video, this person of interest video of what looked like a man walking down an alley behind the Tepes' home between 2 and 5 in the morning. They were wearing gray pants, a dark jacket, and a hood. And they were looking away from what appears to be the home surveillance camera that captured this video. And it appears to have been major evidence in helping law enforcement track McKee down. Now, McKee was arrested in Rockford, Illinois, which is about an hour and a half west of Chicago. And on the arresting documents, McKee lists an address for a very nice luxury condo building in the ritzy Lincoln Park neighborhood of Chicago. Looks like a really nice place. And WLS TV in Chicago spoke with one of McKee's neighbors, and she said that he did not come off as someone who would commit a crime like this. This woman said, quote, "He did not seem like somebody that would do something like this. You never know. You meet people everywhere and you don't know if they're a serial killer." She also went on to say, "I sat down with this man. I talked with him at the pool, barbecuing. about what a beautiful day it is. And then he turns out to be a killer. It's kind of shocking. How do you explain to a child that mom and dad are here one day and gone the next? Those are the real victims of this whole case, are the children. End quote. Now, we are still working to learn more information about McKee. And if he did this, why did he do it now? Why did he do it a couple of days after Christmas and on the day before New Year's Eve? Today, McKee did make his first court appearance. This was our first chance to see him since his arrest. This appearance was in Rockford, Illinois, and it was very quick. It lasted less than 3 minutes. Now, McKee didn't seem emotional when he walked into the courtroom. He calmly said his name to the judge. He then waived his extradition, meaning he is slated to return to Ohio to face the charges for allegedly killing the Tepes. Here's what happened in court.
Your name, sir, for the record?
Michael McKee.
Have you had a chance to speak with him?
Yes, Your Honor.
What's your position at this time?
Yes, at this time, Your Honor, on behalf of Mr. McKee, I will assert his right to counsel. I will assert his right to remain silent. And Mr. McKee believes that the most expeditious manner in which he may defend himself against the charges pending in Ohio and to plead not guilty would be to waive his right to an extradition hearing and to have a governor's warrant and to agree to his immediate transportation to Ohio.
Understood, thank you. We will set this matter then for 2 o'clock on Monday for status on the transfer.
Thank you.
Anything else we can do today?
Not from the
Thank you, Kirk.
Thanks, everyone.
And with that, a shake of the hand with his attorney, and McKee exited the courtroom, and now he is awaiting for authorities in Ohio to come pick him up and bring him to Columbus. The judge set a status hearing for Monday next week, and that's only if McKee is still in Illinois and not in Ohio. Now, before we talk more about this case, I do want to share with you the statement from the Tepe family, one that they released on the day of McKee's arrest. This is what it says, quote, "Today's arrest represents an important step toward justice for Monique and Spencer. Nothing can undo the devastating loss of 2 lives taken far too soon. But we are grateful to the City of Columbus Police Department, its investigators, and assisting law enforcement community whose tireless efforts helped to capture the person involved. We thank the community for the continued support, prayers, and compassion shown throughout this tragedy. As the case proceeds, we trust the justice system to hold the person responsible fully accountable. Monique and Spencer remain at the center of our hearts, and we carry forward their love as we surround and protect the 2 children they leave behind. We will continue to honor their lives and the light they brought into this world." End quote. Join us now to talk a little bit more about this investigation and the big developments that happened over the weekend. Retired Detective Commander with the Chicago Police Department, Will Spilar. Thank you for once again talking about this case with us. I remember texting you over the weekend when this broke, and it was like, I had heard, and what had been reported was the divorce was amicable, that it didn't seem like there was a lot of noise there surrounding Michael McKee as a suspect, but maybe that was a ruse by police. And then here they are arresting him. I guess, what was your reaction when you saw that this was the arrest that Columbus police made?
I wasn't surprised. Obviously, we talked about this before, that it was somebody that one or both knew. The question that comes to mind is, why now?
Yeah.
Why so far after the divorce? She's apparently moved on. She's got a family now. Why now? And how did he get in?
Marriage in 2015, so they would have been late 20s, and then they're divorced in 2017. We'll see what other details come out. The marriage documents just say they were incompatible. He keeps the house in Virginia, and then she had moved to Ohio, and don't know how much communication they had over the years. From what we know from police, what seemed to be the mistake allegedly that McKee made was they were able to track him through the neighborhood cameras that we saw, that person of interest picture, which, perhaps I haven't had official confirmation that is him, but let's say it is. And then it goes to a vehicle. The vehicle goes to Rockford, Illinois, or Chicago, or wherever it was, and they're able to piece it together with him. What more evidence, though? Because certainly an ex-husband in the area, in a car, right before a woman and her husband, his ex-wife, are killed, and then leaving shortly thereafter, and he lives in another state. To the public, that is incredibly suspicious. But when it comes to proving a case in a court of law, what more might law enforcement need?
Well, you have to prove that it's him. I mean, okay, we know it's his. Say we got cell phone records. We talked about if that person in the alley was in fact him, and his phone number hit off the cell phone towers, it's an odd number. It's a number that shouldn't typically be there. But that's his phone. And I've had many a trial where the argument is, okay, well, you tracked the person's phone. How do you know he had it? You tracked the person's car. How do you know he was the one that was driving? These are all defense questions. And these are all things where not only do you have to determine that it was his stuff that was there, you have to determine it was him. And I believe, your investigation will clearly show that it was him, obviously. You have to overcome these things when it comes time to trial. An arrest is one thing with probable cause, but proving somebody guilty is a whole different thing. And you have to prove that not only was his stuff there, but he was there.
If he didn't have his cell phone on him, and let's just say there were, you have this video of him in the area, and then in a car that arrives before and after, you're proving that he was in the area. But when it comes to shooting and killing two people, what's the bar when it comes to making an arrest? Because it's easy to say, like, okay, he was there, that could be our suspect. But then, is that enough to say we're going to get the arrest warrant and we're going to take this to another level? And now he's going to face these two charges of plotting and planning to allegedly kill the Tepes.
There's a big difference between probable cause and beyond a reasonable doubt. So your threshold for probable cause isn't that high. I mean, a reasonable person with all this evidence that we know about, not including some of the stuff they may have, like maybe something from inside that house that they produced, that they made evidence to say, okay, we have probable cause to say it was him. Threshold for probable cause is not that high. Reasonable doubt's a lot higher. So I think the probable cause with his vehicle, with his stuff, with his phone and his vehicle being around there, if in fact they have that, I think that's enough for probable cause.
Because in the criminal complaint, it does talk about identifying him on the neighborhood surveillance, and then the car, that is his car, they say, that then they trace to Rockford where he's arrested. What information are you required to put in a criminal complaint? Like, how many of your cards do you have to lay out? Because it doesn't seem like they're laying out a lot and still remaining some things close to the vest.
Well, they have a lot of theories in this case, I'm sure, that they have to prove. So you don't need to do that in a probable cause hearing. Probable cause, you just have to say, a reasonable person would believe that a crime has occurred and this person did it. So the threshold is, like I said, low, and you don't really tip everything. Again, it all comes out anyway, because during the discovery phase, you can't have any surprises in the prosecution. The defense has to have everything that you have. So eventually it's all going to come out. And there's an investigation that's still going on. There's a search warrant that was executed in Chicago yesterday. All that evidence has to be sifted through. Do we have tolls? It's just about a 7-hour ride from Columbus to Rockford. So, and a couple of those are tolls. Do we have tolls? Do we have him stopping, using a debit card or credit card at a gas station to get gas? These are all things that you don't necessarily have to put forward in probable cause, but you need to get together for your prosecution.
The investigation took roughly 9 or 10 days to be able to make this arrest. And I think it's easy for the public to say, well, if you had him on surveillance video and you have this person of interest, and then you follow to the next surveillance video, and then you have this car, which through a license plate reader, let's say they have that, then you can tie it to this person. Shouldn't this have been a quick arrest? I know the public, there are people in the public who could say that this was kind of a, I'm not saying this, but it was an easy line to make from one to the other. Like, how much work does it actually take to piece together something like that, of tying him to this crime, to also kind of piecing together all of that video and tracking him down?
It takes a while. I mean, nine days is not unreasonable. And we can think somebody did something for 10 minutes into the case, but you have to prove that. You have to get to that probable cause threshold. And you're also talking about, you're not making an arrest across the street from where the crime occurred. You're making an arrest in Illinois. So you have to make sure you have a warrant in place, obviously, and that warrant is disseminated to other law enforcement so they can execute it. So it takes a while to get that stuff together. 9 days to me is not that unreasonable.
And I think of the last episode we did together, which I think was on Friday last week, and then McKee is arrested, I think sometime between Friday and Saturday. I think he was booked just after midnight on Saturday morning in the sheriff's office out in Rockford. And I remember we were talking about the Columbus chief of police. She did some one-on-one interviews, and she had said, we don't really have a suspect at this point, like very much the poker face. What do you make of just the way that she, having to make a statement to the public, but at the same time, clearly there was a belief behind the scenes that they had something going.
There was no question. That interview, she had to do it. Like you said, the public needs to know certain things, like safety. Is there a maniac running around trying to kill people in their homes? She has to come on and say that, no, that's not going on. But she was very good when she said, there's some things we just can't talk about. Now that, for me, says they've got something. They're on the trail of somebody. Is that guy in the alley him? I don't know. Is it a red herring that they threw out there so that McKee feels like they think it's this guy? It's not me. Who knows? But I kudos to Columbus PD. They did a nice job on this.
Yeah, and 9 days. Again, it's one of those things where you want that arrest so quickly, just so this family can get the justice that they deserve, and there can be some closure for the community. But for as long as 9 days felt at times, to be able to piece it together the way that they did is very impressive. I think if what is alleged to be true is, and this is someone who had a very good job and, lived in a very nice building in Lincoln Park in Chicago, financially seemed to have a lot of things going well for him. But then at the same time, here is someone who gets in a car and allegedly drives several hours to commit a terrible, terrible crime. And it's just, I think about, like, at any point in time, if he actually did this, he could have pulled over and turned around, but he didn't. How does that factor into the case that a prosecutor could make, because he is charged with first-degree murder, that this was a premeditated act?
There's no question it was premeditated. It is awfully hard to argue sudden and intense passion on a 7-hour drive to where you're going to commit the crime, which would knock it down to second degree in Illinois anyway. It's very difficult to put that in there and say he just acted spontaneously. He didn't act spontaneously. He planned it out, and he decided this was the day that it was going to happen. You're going to probably get some stuff off his computer. You're going to get some stuff off his phones. That's why they collected all that evidence yesterday. And you're not going to be able to make that argument that it was sudden and intense passion. So first-degree murder is appropriate, and I think they can prove it.
At this point, police have not officially said how he was able to get into the house, but they had a security camera. The Tepes did. We can see that there's some sort of whether it's a Ring or some other brand. So, if they had a security camera, you would think that police have a pretty good idea about how he was able to get into the home. If they do, why withhold that information when making this arrest?
Well, again, it's if they can weigh out what they need to put in the document, they work with a prosecutor before it goes to a judge and say, okay, I think you've got the probable cause. Maybe they didn't need that. And here's another thing: we know that they have surveillance on the front of the house. What about the back of the house? So if he doesn't come in the front door, if he comes in the back door from whatever way he gets in, you may not have video evidence that suggests that. Now, you may have something inside the house, because I believe she was found in the bed. He was found outside the bed with multiple gunshot wounds. Maybe he's alerted. Maybe they're alerted when he comes in and there's a struggle. Maybe he takes her out first, which is why there's one shot to her, multiple shots to him, and it wakes him up. And then there's some kind of a struggle. Maybe there's some evidence that he left behind inside the house that they had to process that they couldn't put into probable cause, or they did. We don't know. We didn't see the whole complaint, so we don't know exactly what they put in their charging document. But I have a feeling they knew who they were looking for pretty early on.
How long does it typically take to have that type of evidence processed? Because you have the surveillance video, you're tying him to the scene, but maybe it's the shell casings that we've talked about. Maybe it's fingerprints somewhere in the house. How long does it typically take to get that together to be part of the case that prosecutors will eventually, try? If this goes to trial, we'll try in court.
Well, let's break that down one thing at a time.
Yeah.
So you're talking about video evidence. Video evidence has to be collected by a tech. Okay. I just can't go to a house, and say, hey, listen, I need your Ring camera or your Nest camera. Give it to me. No. there has to be a process. There has to be a tech that downloads it off the equipment, and it has to be documented. It has to be, you have to document how you did it. You have to say that I know how to do it. That's one thing. And it's not just one camera. They track them through the neighborhood, so there's probably multiple cameras that had to be downloaded by a tech. Fingerprints. A fingerprint's fantastic. You can lift a fingerprint out of a house, off a window or whatever, but you have to match it up to someone. So how do you match it up to somebody? How do you match it up to a suspect? Well, we put it into APHIS. That's the fingerprint database, okay? And if it hits. Now, I know as a professional, as a police officer, I had to be fingerprinted. And I believe that if you're licensed as a physician or a professional license, that you also have to be fingerprinted. So maybe you get a hit that way. But I think that's a specific request. I don't think everybody goes into APHIS just because you've been fingerprinted. So if a fingerprint's on file, you have to match it. So a fingerprint's really nice to have, but if you don't have anybody to match it to, it's just a fingerprint. You have to do elimination prints from the victims and everybody else in the house. It takes a long time.
He is going to be sent back, presumably, he's having this hearing Monday in Illinois, and then he's going to face charges in Ohio. When he is being brought from, you're taking a suspect facing very serious charges and you're going to drive him, however many hours. I mean, what is that car ride like to be the officer driving, knowing that you have someone who allegedly took the lives of two people, but this is an open case. I mean, it's, is it small talk in the car? I mean, what are you able to get information from a suspect, a defendant in this case? Like when you're making this, several hour drive, unless they fly them. But I mean, if it's a drive or something like that, I mean, what is that like?
I've done it both ways. I've done it where we fly people. You sit in the last seats in the airplane all the way in the back. There's not much conversation there. And I've also had a long drive from a guy that killed a Chicago police officer that we got up in Winnebago County. No, Warsaw County. I got that all wrong. Dodge County, Wisconsin. Okay, so it's a long ride, Dodge County down to Chicago. And that was a long ride. And there was very little conversation. You can't just casually bring up stuff that's evidence. If you're going to talk to this person, you have to advise them of Miranda. If you are talking to a murder suspect, it has to be on video. So you're better off saying nothing because you have to record it if you're going to talk about the case, and Miranda has to be involved.
And we don't know if he requested a lawyer at this point or what his initial conversations were like with law enforcement, whether it be before the arrest and in the days leading up to it. And then once the arrest was made, whether he made any statements, we'll see if that comes out. But this was a guy who made a good amount of money to live the life that he did professionally. I assume he's going to be able to get a pretty good lawyer. We'll see how that plays out. I mean, what type of access do you as an investigator have after the arrest at this point? Are they going to be able to have with McKee moving forward, assuming he lawyers up?
Now, I would really be surprised if the people from Columbus, the detectives from Columbus, didn't already go to Chicago to try to talk to him. I'd be really surprised if that didn't happen, because that's the first thing I would do is send my detectives to talk to somebody when they're in custody to see if you can get a statement. Once he has a lawyer, it's a little more tricky. Miranda is, if they ask for counsel, can't talk to them. You can unless they reinitiate contact with you. So you can make a request for an interview through the lawyer, but rarely does that happen where a lawyer will say, "Yep, come on, talk to my client." So the talking to him probably is over with.
And we'll see what happens next. Obviously, a huge step in this investigation. I mean, one of those stories where when the news comes across that the arrest was been made and then you see who it was, it really makes you say, wow. And you hope the families of the Tepes and certainly those children, you think of them, but you hope the families are feeling, some sense of closure that this arrest was made. We'll see how the legal process plays out. Retired Detective Commander with the Chicago Police Department, Will Svilar, thank you as always for being with us in Law&Crime. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Now, again, the Tepes leave behind these two children who were unharmed. They were in the house the night that their parents were killed. But at ages just 4 and 1 years old, your heart just breaks for these children. They are with family members right now, and there is a GoFundMe page that has raised more than $210,000 to help those kids moving forward. That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law&Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify, and now you can find episodes of On the Case on Peacock. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.